Andrew, we're so happy you're here. Yeah, I'm really honored. I think that when I think about people who know a lot about community, like you're the first person who comes to my list. So basically, just to do a quick introduction of myself, I'm Lexy. I'm the CEO and founder of Sidebar. And at Sidebar, our mission is to accelerate everyone's career. Like that's what our laser focus is. And so much of what we're finding in conversations with our members in the small groups is the power of basically go to market and the power of launching new products, of creating new ideas, of getting traction. So much of it is based on community. That's a huge thing we believe at Sidebar. And Andrew, I know that's a huge thing you believe in. So I'd love to introduce everyone to Andrew. Andrew is an exceptional founder and has an incredible track record in tech and has gone through this journey of kind of leaving his old job and building out multiple companies all around community and all around leaders in tech interacting with each other and really kind of creating the next generation of ways that we connect both as an industry and both as kind of a generation. So Andrew, I'd love to turn it over to you to do a quick intro as well and to really then kind of dive into what I think the goal is, which is having a conversation around building community. Like, how do we do that, and how do we use community to help grow our businesses?
Yeah, this is really cool, and I'm excited to like learn from you as well. I big fan of what you're building with Sidebar, and I think I like your mission, which is like to help people accelerate their careers in tech and business. I write a lot about that on my blog, and it seems like you guys have built the the productized version of that that is more accessible, to most people around the world. So excited to have this conversation, and I'll kick off with an introduction about myself. So I,
Please.
the first thing I usually like to start off with is the fact that I'm an immigrant and I've lived in 5 different countries, in the last 28 years. And, community builders know, every time, every time you leave a place and you have to move, you have to rebuild your community, your network from scratch. And funny enough, in my experience, the most community builders are the way they are because during their formative years and during childhood, they needed, they seek that they wanted friends, they wanted community around them, and they got to a point where they just built it themselves because it was hard to find. Um, in terms of my professional career, I started working at a telco in Canada. Did that for like 3 years during. And there was a point where during COVID, it was March 2020. I was like, I want to live in New York City. I feel like New York City is like the most exciting place in the world. I'm very outspoken about that. And so I probably picked the worst time in history to move to New York City in August 2020, because it was COVID and everything was shut down and it was like the hotbed of COVID. But I moved to New York City in 2020, worked for Facebook, convinced Facebook to sponsor my visa, relocate me, and I joined them as a strategy and ops associate. Um, and in parallel, I'd moved to New York City, didn't really have any friends, didn't have a network. You couldn't go to bars, you couldn't go to restaurants, and so I had to rebuild that community from scratch that I had from Toronto. Um, so I started doing that. I started like hosting meetups, started pinging people on Twitter, LinkedIn, asking them to get coffee with me. Did that really consistently over the 3 or 4 years. And one day, one of the co-founders of the world's most popular language learning application came to an event, and I'm like, there's something here. So I started, sort of systemizing it and eventually turning it into a business, which it is today. Um, After Facebook, I went to Google as a product lead, and 4 months, actually 6 months ago, I left to build my own. I call it creator led media and events company. And so today, I host something like 4 to 6 events a month for tech CEOs, investors. There's different variations of it, ranging from conferences to private dinners to mansion parties. And I also work with a product studio to build consumer apps, and I'm an early stage investor as well. So that's really long winded, but that's sort of like that captures like everything I'm focused on today.
I mean, it's brilliant. And I think that, there's so much to highlight there, but one of the things that I think you really articulated that I think is so powerful is how much a part of community has always been a part of your life, right? It's not like you just turned on one day and you're like, I want to be interested in community. Like it comes from a deep part of being an immigrant, living in all these countries, wanting to reach out, having these dreams, finding your way there. And even when you got to New York at a time in the pandemic, not letting that stop you from reaching out, meeting all these people and kind of building a network of people around you. For one question that I have is, with your current business right now, events is kind of the medium through which you build community. Like why events? Like tell me about that. Like how do you think about that? What like in all the different ways that you've built community, whether it's through one-on-one, whether it's through moving to a new place, whether it's through working at these companies, like why are events like the medium where you think that it's so powerful?
I was trying to solve my own problem at the time. And so, when I came here in August 2020, I just needed friends. I needed to find my community. I needed to build my professional networks. And something that people are craving at the time because of the lockdowns was in person. I love, I love the sense of nothing will ever replicate the feeling of being in a room with 12 people sharing food, breaking bread. And like while like Zooms and like virtual sessions are, they're different. They fill a different gap. They're complementary to the events, but you can never remove the events from the idea of community. Um, and separately, I've always been interested in hospitality and hotels and bars and restaurants. And I don't drink anymore, but at a point, I love clubs. And I was just fascinated with how they're able to shape the human experience through these tactical things, like from the moment you walk in to how the server greets you to when you sit down. So I was always fascinated with that. So I wanted to merge the two worlds of community and hospitality experiences.
Yeah, I just love that so much, right? Is that like you really were a student of experience and that you were really aiming to create that like a certain very clean and clear experience and that events were just the medium in which to do that. I mean, I think it's really inspiring. You inspire me personally because as someone who loves people and loves creating community, I think your ability to just kind of get to that atomic unit of there's nothing quite like having a room of 12 really engaged people who can have this experience that's life changing in one evening and focusing on that. Like it doesn't need to be this grand thing that's planned out for many years. It doesn't need to be written across the stars. Like there's little moments that can have a huge impact. And that's something that we really believe with a lot of our in-person work at Sidebar too. Like what was your first big unlock for building community and building your following? Like what was the first step change you saw?
Yeah, I guess there's two things. One is I I was surrounded there was a point in my career where I was really fortunate to be surrounded by really brilliant people who had so much wisdom to share, but they weren't amazing writers or they weren't on social media. And so they didn't have a means of distribution of sharing their wisdom. And so what I would do is just go to all of them, similar to what Tim Ferriss does on his pod, sort of the idea of a curious learner. I would approach all these experts, um, ask them questions, distill their knowledge into a format that does well on like Twitter or like LinkedIn, and I would just share it and disperse the insights, and then use that to sort of build an online audience and distribution through email, LinkedIn, Twitter, and people really resonated with that. I think even today, LinkedIn is one of the platforms that is heavily underutilized. If you look at the ratio from content consumers to content creators on LinkedIn, it's heavily skewed in place of the consumers. There's not enough creators out there. That's one thing where I had like an aha moment. I was like, wow, this is a gold mine of being able to capture attention online. It's not as difficult as people say. And then the second thing was when I was in New York and I posted on Reddit and I asked who wanted to grab a beer with me or who wanted to go on a walk with me. The attention that post got, um, which is it just made it so immediately clear that people were craving that human connection. And so you sort of combine the two, and I think I've seen a lot of people host events and bring communities together, but very few merge the two of IRL and URL and build funnels that or build a flywheel that sort of keeps the momentum going from both platforms. Similar to what you've built with Sidebar, you have that online, I think largely online component, virtual component, and then you're moving into the IRL space, and I think that's really powerful when you combine those two things.
I mean, yeah, we believe the exact same thing, right? It's like, how do you get kind of the flywheel where everyone's excited and learning and be able to grow from each other? And you're like that connection of being connected 24/7, but also those in-person moments, right? Where it is, whether it's a walk or a dinner or an experience where you feel, oh my gosh, like I'm not alone. You know, like
Mhm.
heavy is the head who wears the crown. For leaders and for founders, like you can feel like we're just trying to
Yeah.
solve a problem that no one else has solved. And we've talked about this a bit too. And it's just super authentic to be in a real place where you can just learn and talk and kind of let your guard down and have this authentic conversation you might not be able to have anywhere else, or say something that you may not have been exposed to or may not have thought before. I'm going to hold it really lightly to just kind of find our way in building and creating everything we want to build and create in the world and accelerating who we want to be. And so, one question, I think you highlighted some really tactical advice that I really appreciate. Like if I were to distill this down, I think there's this the power of IRL experience. And then you talked about this flywheel and like engaging with your community and how you started, which was being around all these brilliant people who just didn't have the distribution to share their wisdom. And you're like, wait, there's like alpha here. There's like an opportunity. Like, how do you think about engaging with your community? So your community is thriving, right? But how do you provide value to people? Like, and how does that help with your business? Like, maybe just break down the flywheel a little bit. And whether that's through LinkedIn or through other places, like I think all of the listeners would love the kind of the tactics of how you think about it, because your strategy here is just the best that I've seen.
Yeah. And yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, I'll do my best to sort of break it down. I guess the first step is you always you start online. You start in a tech because that's how you have the ability to scale and reach millions of people. The first step is to get really good at gathering attention online, and that could be Twitter, LinkedIn, and if your objective is to build something similar to what I've built, is the whole purpose is to gather attention online and then funnel those people into an IRL environment, i.e., if you're hosting a dinner, create a lot of buzz so people come to your dinner. Um, Inevitably, a dinner is just 3, 4 hours. People want to connect before and after the event, and so there are different tactics and mechanisms you can incorporate, like certain ways you can send emails. You could create a group chat so that people can connect before the event and after the event. And now, in my case, I advised a company called Saturday, a social app, so that everybody that went to my events, and we onboarded, I think, like tens of thousands of people, probably like 20,000 people into the app so that they can meet people before the event and after the event. That's the whole point of that. You need that sort of tech layer for people to sort of connect outside these in-person environments. And then after that, you provide you've provided an incredible event experience. And I've never charged at my events. I've charged at one event out of hundreds. And what I say is normally, I hope you had a great time. Please share some feedback. I don't charge, and I probably never will for these type of events. I just have one favor to ask. If you enjoyed it, please tell someone about it, or tweet about it, or post about it. And a lot of people come to me and they're like, "You've done so much for me. You've introduced me to friends, investors. What can I do for you?" I'm like, "Just engage with my posts. Just comment." And so that, and then people do it. Let's say 10% of people actually do it. That creates a flywheel, grows your online audience. Um, that's one of the flywheels for events. Now, I also do a separate thing where I have a list of 1,800 early stage investors, family offices, and angel investors. And every month I send them an email of founders who are fundraising money, who are raising money. And that service is free to everyone. And so through that experience, I've helped many founders, raise their pre-seed, seed, Series A rounds. People start, I ask them the same thing. I'm like, if it's been helpful, I don't need carry. Maybe that's foolish of me, but I don't need carry. I don't need a fee. Just like tell people about it, post about it, and then that keeps the flywheel going to the point where my top funnel for founders is now massive, and my top funnel for talent who are looking to work for early stage founders is massive. And on the other end, investors are like, wow, this is a great deal. This free deal flow. And so that continues to grow as well. So those are like the fundamentals. Like it's not quite a business yet. This investor deal flow thing, I call it the A list. Not quite a business yet, but I'm sure I could flip a lever and turn it into a business someday. Right now, I'm just benefiting from the distribution and from sort of the goodwill I've built.
I mean, Andrew, I love that so much. It's so inspiring. And I think that one of the things that I think is so powerful about your approach to business and something I admire and really believe in too is this idea of giving. all the time, right? Giving like just like you're just creating value for people. And like and I think at all of these opportunities, what I hear you saying is when, most people would think an event like yours would cost money, right? Most people would be like, oh, like I'm giving this deal flow because I want to be like I want something in return. And you're just trying to create as much value as possible for as many people as you can. And your request is just simple, which is just, when I post content, like comment on it, or just like, be in my corner as I build this. Like, how did you think about that? How did you think about that as the unlock? Because it's something I really personally believe in. When for Sidebar, I just really want, and our team deeply wants to accelerate people's careers. Like we just want you to
Mhm.
come in and just be on fire. And in 3 months and 6 months and 9 months, be like, wow, I am in a completely different place. I'm solving problems in a completely different way. I feel so much
Mhm.
less alone. I have so much more tactical, practical advice and feedback than I did 3, 6, 9 months ago. Like I can apply this tomorrow. And I'm growing really quickly and I'm learning really fast. Like, how did you think about this as like a core piece of your business? Giving first.
Yeah. Um, I've realized like every business is you build a business by solving problems. And in the early stages, when I was still at Facebook and when I was still at Google, not a lot of people know this, but I wasn't able to monetize anything outside my W-2 income from Google and Facebook because I was restricted by my visa. So I could only make money from Google. And so I was like, that's a bummer, but I'm still going to do activity outside. I'm still going to do stuff. I'm just not going to charge for it. So that's how it all started. I was restricted from profiting off of these things. So I spent all my energy in building stuff and solving problems and helping people so that I thought the day that I did, I was able to leave and build my own thing, it would come back. And it did. The first day I left Google, profitable day one. And all these companies came to me and they were like, we've admired what you've been doing for the last few years. Let's talk, partnerships and deals. Um, I think similar for you guys, like you're solving a problem that very few people are trying to solve right now. And it's not only the idea of community. A lot of people build communities, but it's specific, um, a specific, almost like a premium community where you are curated with a group of people that can support your future career interests and goals. And very few people are doing that. But you're really just solving problems at scale, and that's really all it is. And I think any entrepreneur will realize that like you solve problems and you'll get paid. It's not the other way around. And yeah, everybody sort of knows that at this point.
I mean, I think that's totally right at the core. And I think that it's it's really powerful to just solve people's problems. That's how we think about work too. And that really it's just it's like peers accelerate our career so much, right? These communities are so vital for us, both as people, but both in our work lives because, they hold us accountable, they push us, we learn from them. Like, there's this idea that we kind of started on for Sidebar was, what would the world be like if everyone had 10 people who kind of believed in them no matter what? Like, even when we kind of lose faith in ourselves, like, how could
Mhm.
you really just like hold each other up? And when I'm faced with something that's like net new. I mean, this is what I feel like with you, Andrew. Like when I'm like, oh, I don't know how to do this. And you're like, I've done this 5 times. Like this is what you do. Like that exchange is so powerful. It's so concrete. And I think what's really cool about what your story is that even though it was actually physically impossible for you to get paid outside of Google, you were like, I am just going to solve people's problems. Like I'm just going to get in there and build a business by solving people's problems one time and one time and one time. And then at a moment when I'm able to, I can turn that into a business that makes money. But before it's just going to be a business that I just do. And with that laser focus on problem solving. And so we have a question. We have a question from the audience from Ruthie. And the question was, what was the first communities we both started? So Andrew, as the community expert, why don't you go first?
First community I ever started.
Yeah, what was the first one?
Yeah. In 2020, when the world like shut down because of COVID, I started this online LinkedIn community. I think it was called like the Inspired Collective or something. And it was anyone who I'd met online or in person who had achieved a certain level of success that I found remarkable and I found inspiring, but was also collaborative, open-minded, and kind. And I put all those people into a LinkedIn group, and we would like go on a Zoom every week and help each other and boost each other's social content, but give each other advice and pool our resources. Um, yeah, it's since it's that was 4 years ago. It's sort of like fallen off, but that was the first taste of community. It taught me a lot about how you maintain an online community and why people join these things and the problem you're solving. But curious to hear yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's amazing. And one of the things that I would just highlight is like, that community being just 4 years ago. Like it's just the power of when you know what you're going after and you are like really understand the core value of what you're trying to create, how much progress you can make because now you're in this incredible spot and that's not that much time. I've always really felt a responsibility in all my interactions with people to make them feel empowered and positive and just to reflect the mirror about what I see about them. So what I think about is when I was in college, um, everyone I walked by, everyone I interacted with, I'd always just try and compliment them or just encourage them or just kind of feel like, remember like what they were working on or what class they were or their passion. And really just have like a really good memory for what matters to others. And I think that, so I think building community and kind of curating it was really important for me from a really early age. And so I think that, kind of my first communities were really social, but less social from let's have like a lot of friends perspective and more social for just kind of holding everyone's vision for who they want to be in the world. And just if I had a moment to just help that forward any way I could. And a lot of times I don't have the answer. And so it's not like, here's the right answer, but it's just like, I
Mhm.
believe in you. Like, I guess I wanted
Yeah,
to be this person who just believed in everyone um, as hard as I could, because I just wanted to be in a world where people got their dreams. And
yeah,
I kind of believe in a world that it's large enough for everyone to go get what they want. And so, yeah, that's kind of why I was so drawn to it was this sense of just deeply wanting everyone to go become whoever they want to go be in the world and doing anything I could to hold that space for them to just be like, yeah, yeah, like I believe in that. Like, and I see that. And you're so brilliant. You're so good at X, Y, and Z. How do you figure that out? And I think that the kindness and the openness part of it of that first community was always like a big part for me, which was um I was always really blessed with people who super believed in me, even when I lost faith. And I
Mhm.
always want to be that person for other people. Not that they would necessarily lose faith. I wouldn't hope that on anyone, but that if they just needed someone there, that I was like, I'm just here and rooting for you kind of always. And so that was the origin for
That's
me.
Yeah, it's cool to hear that because as you were sort of telling your story, it's very clear you have like a surplus to give more than you get. And it's the idea of like positive sum thinking.
Yeah.
I meet so many, I've hosted maybe 30,000 people at this point, and I meet a lot of people who don't have this surplus, and they come in with the intention of wanting to extract and take.
Yeah.
And then there are other people, funny enough, like the most successful people I've met, they have that surplus and they're always giving. And so I'm sure like the community you've built is like an extension of who you are, which is cool to see.
Well, and I think that's such a brilliant, yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for articulating that. And I think it's such a brilliant way of looking at it is like we're so lucky. And I think being able to just be like, oh yeah, like this, like and I think it's on all these different levels, right? Like this is why I think in-person events are so brilliant because on any given Tuesday night, you could just go live your Tuesday and be busy and kind of be in the hub of trying to build and create in the world. And it's like it's great. It's beautiful. It's like being alive on this planet. It's awesome. It's Tuesday. But there's a chance you can go to this like curated experience and meet these people that you didn't even know existed before. And have
Yeah,
this experience that kind of changes the course of your life. You have a
yeah,
conversation, you meet a friend, and like that idea of on any given day, you can change the course of your life in this positive way is really
that's cool.
powerful. And so I just think that like that's what we kind of think about in Sidebar, and that's what I see with you too. Is just like there's this moment in time that you step into, and maybe your life is different. And so I think that yeah, that's like a big deal for me for community is just making people feel really seen and heard and like they're the center of the world. And how do you do that when you're so busy and there's so many things? It's just kind of dropping down into the presence. Even
Yeah.
talking to you, there's like, there's so many things we could be doing, but I'm just happy to be here and with everyone on the call and learning from each other. And so, next question tactically is, okay, so we're building community. This is from Kyle. Like, this is this concept of how much do you give away for free in a community, right? Um, do you give it all away for free and monetize it some other way? Do you give some away from it for free? Like, Andrew, I think everyone would love your thoughts about just the structure of kind of free and how you turn on the paid and what that looks like.
Yeah, so this is moving into the realm of like entrepreneurship. So I'll speak from like the perspective of
Yeah, let's do
entrepreneurship.
that.
Um, the biggest advantage you have as an entrepreneur is your ability to ship things really quickly and get feedback really quickly. You and I both worked at Facebook. Takes a long time to ship features. Takes months. But when you work for yourself and when you're building your own company, you can do that really, really quickly and rapidly. That's your key advantage. And so with something like this, there's no like standardized rule. And in fact, it's very subjective. It's very hard to answer that. My advice to you is test little things and figure out what your distribution channels are. If you're building an online business or a business that is primarily sold online, then your channels are like Twitter, their email. With email, you can like A/B test. With Twitter, you could tweet something and then within the next 10 minutes you can see how it does and then a repost. You could test those funnels really quickly. And so if you're trying to figure out like when you should start monetizing or paywalling or adding a subscription or selling more digital products, what you want to do is just see the traction on the free stuff. If the free stuff does really well, then you put a price tag behind it and you sort of upsell them on a more premium product. Now you have to, once you put a price tag on something, you have to make sure you're fulfilling the value that it represents. Um, I'll give you an example. Here's how most events in the world are run if they're ticketed: concerts, conferences, all those things. Um, they uh, they have ascending ticket prices. And so as you get closer to the date of the event, the price goes up. And the way these organizers hedge against that is they provide discounts. So as it goes up, if you realize the demand is actually decreasing, it should be increasing as I get closer to the event. But if it's decreasing, then you offer steep discounts. So you always have a way to hedge yourself. In your case, if let's say you are creating content and you're looking to give some away, monetize other stuff, just give free stuff, do a free email course. And then at some point, if you set a sort of a milestone for yourself, 1,000 subscribers, for example, once you hit that, start paywalling stuff and see what sticks and just react to that.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much brilliance there. I think a couple of things to call out. One, speed. Like, this is like the number one piece of advice that I've gotten starting a company is that all big companies, speed wins. Like you just are your ability as an entrepreneur to do things really fast, test things, learn really quickly. Like, that's a great barometer in order. Like that's the leading indicator, I think, of success in my mind, is just how fast are you testing and how fast are you learning. I think number two, which I love what you're saying, if I distill it down, is like make sure you get fire. Like, make sure that you're like, even at free, like make sure that you have something that's solving a problem for people and that they really want and love. Like, that almost the monetization part of it is secondary to the finding the fire. And then once you have the fire, great. Like, you hit that goal, 1,000 people for free or something, then you can figure out how to strike it and monetize it. But I think it'd be really easy to go down the route of trying to focus on making the money first and missing the fire, making the money, slowing it down so you can't test as much. And then all of a sudden you're kind of like the cart is coming before the horse in this analogy. And so I just thought that that was really well articulated and super helpful. So we have a couple more audience questions, and I really do want everyone to ask super tactical questions. We'll get to them all. But Andrew's here and is brilliant at this. And we'll make sure to tee it up. Andrew, I kind of want to change uh to like a more authentic. I mean, not that this hasn't been authentic, but a more kind of real, put our real hats on, authentic question, which is, what's been your most unexpected kind of immovable problems with events, or like things you had to like get around, or things you're like, Oh, this is kind of the key to everything, but I didn't really realize it in the beginning. Like, if you were to be like, here's the $100,000 piece of advice I've learned in starting these companies, like, what is it? And is it what you expected?
So I think that's a great question. I don't think I've been asked that before, but it helps me evaluate my business a little bit. So when you're building a software business, the customers, vendors, investors, collaborators you work with are all, um, they're all people from the tech world. They're from software, they're from tech, they're from business. When you build an events business, um, the talent you have accessible to you, the vendors you have to work with, are all from the hospitality world. The caliber of talent is I can't exaggerate how different it is versus going from like a Facebook Google to working with people who run clubs or chain of clubs in hotels and like people who rent yachts for a living. Um, that's been the hardest part. We're speaking a different
Yeah.
language. They have different standard operating procedures. They have different and their work ethic is incredibly different. And anybody who knows hospitality knows that it's a very short term, high churn industry. People don't stay in that world for a long time. You think about waiters and servers and people in that world, they're just doing it for wages and sort of short term arrangements. So that's been really tricky. Now, I do events in 8 different cities, and so when you try to throw a house party, and when I say party, they're mostly networking events. But when you try to like rent a house in Miami to host a group of tech executives, it's really hard to find good vendors there. So
Yeah.
it was tough in Miami. So that's one like the like know if you're building a business, just know the people you're going to be working with and selling to, and getting paid, getting paid from. So that's probably the biggest thing.
I think that makes so much sense. And like in going into, if you knew that then, what advice would you give everyone on the call? As they kind of go into their businesses and you hit this thing that's pretty central to your core business. Obviously, you're just plowing right through it. Like when we hit those as founders, right? When we hit those as leaders, where you're like, whoa, this is not what I expected to be dealing with. Like, what's your advice on how to get through it?
Just survey the landscape and like survey the space to understand what you're getting into. In environments like events that are higher risk and there's more in the line, just find ways to implement measures or tactics that can like de-risk you a little bit as much as you can, whether that is better contracts, better lawyers, or just a more thorough vetting process for your vendors. Just make sure you have things in place to de-risk all the risks you see in the space you're going to be playing in.
That makes a lot of sense, right? It's just like survey the landscape, like create space,
Yeah.
like you kind of do the work. Okay, I have one more question, and then I thought what we could do is kind of do a like super efficient fly through all the questions of people on the call, and kind of go from there. And so I think my last question, for this section is, um, authentically, I think one of the really interesting questions that comes up when you have a product that's working is what's the right go-to-market, right? What's the right way to bring this, like what's the right distribution channel? That's kind of what you talked about from the very beginning, right? There's this really interesting tension between the product and the distribution, and you're someone who's just like world-class at distribution. Like, how do you think about, okay, I have a product, it's working, I have like people are showing me interest, and now I want to bring it to a lot more people. Like one of the things that I really have admired about your business is that I think you've done the kind of 1 to 10 really well. Like you were able to take something that was like working and then distribute it to like now it's like really working. Like what's your best advice for that kind of that? Because we get this question all the time in Sidebar, and I think it's really important. And I think it's like kind of the topic for founders and leaders right now is you have some fire. You're like, people like this. Okay, I'm on to step 2 in this process. Like what's your advice for that? How do you break that down?
Community is tricky. And the game as much as I do. Community is tricky because you can't grow too quickly. And so I know you guys you have a very thorough vetting and
Yeah,
application process. You
absolutely.
keep the bar very, very high. I've seen many communities that just like let everyone in because it's revenue. But for mine, I've been very intentional Well, I have different formats of events, but I've been very intentional with vetting, and I have a very thorough process for vetting, as I'm sure you have. And it's growing slowly. It's I don't think it's growing. It's growing about 5% a month right now in terms of event attendees. So not super quickly. I can ramp that up anytime, but I intentionally keep it at that rate. Um, you kind of alluded to it, but in terms of what's next, I've been doing these mixers and dinners for about 3 years now. I like press about me, and everyone knows me as the tech party guy here in New York. Um, I need to come up with a second act, which is, I think like storylines have 3 to 5 year time horizons, and then people get bored and they sort of move on to the next thing. So I'm like, what is my next act? I have a few ideas. One of them, which I'm working on, is a conference series. And so, I started with the idea of bringing people together so that they could, um, have better lives because they would meet business partners, vendors, investors, friends, romantic, partners. The next part of that equation is like, how do I educate people, not just entertain people and connect people? How do I educate people? And so as part of that, I'd like to build like the next version of South by Southwest, the next version of Web
Wow.
Summit that caters toward the sort of the younger up and coming generation that may not relate to these old school industry conferences where everybody wears a suit and shakes each other's hands very formally, and there's no rapport, and it's something that you feel like you're obligated to go to because you work in sales or some industry that is very involved in those kind of conferences, but it's more like a you go because you want to. um, so working on that, and I'm excited about it. I think I'll have something to show in the next few months.
Andrew, I'm so excited about it. Like I see it as you describe it, right? And I think that, that concept of not needing to wear a suit and come together and learn with brilliant people, and build like the next version of that, the next iteration of that. That's like an incredibly powerful future. And just as you articulate it into existence. So I really appreciate that. And I just want to be a part of it. I know it's going to be really successful. Okay, so let's go do this. Let's switch topics. And again, I encourage everyone with Andrew here to ask a bunch of questions. And Andrew, let's just fly through these. And
Cool.
so yeah, we'll just and create as much value as we can in the time that we have. And so here we go. We have 18 minutes, so let's go for it. One question is like, who pays for the events? If people aren't paying for it, how do you run them?
In the earlier days, again, it was COVID, and so when these restaurants and bars just started opening up, I negotiated very rigorously, and I just went to them and say, hey, nobody's going to your bar. Do you want me to fill it, or I'll go to the bar next door and I'll bring 100 people there on a Tuesday night. So a lot of those venues were free, and then companies started coming to me, so I couldn't take payment, so I was like, why don't you just pay the bar and pay for the venue, and no money flows through me. So that's how I did it in the early days.
Okay, I love it. That makes a lot of sense. What's the most important part of being an event host? What matters the most?
Um, from the perspective of like hosting a good event, it's just who you invite. It's all about the people in the room. And now secondary to that is how you facilitate those conversations and connections. So from the moment someone walks in to the moment they leave, like how you facilitate those experiences.
So I actually really like that. Like that's kind of a counterintuitive answer, which is like, that the core of making this really good is just like it's well before the event occurs. It's the people you invite. It's like how you
Mhm.
curate it. And I think
Yeah.
that, and I think Andrew, another thing that I really have appreciated about how you think about this is that the events really aren't they're not focused on what you would think a normal mixer event would be. Like, can you talk a little bit about your strategy there? Like, it's much more focused on human connection than you would
Mhm.
imagine at like a normal bar meetup or something like that.
Yeah, well, it starts, like I mentioned, it starts with like the people. And so you'll find that a lot of my events, it's fairly ambitious and fairly open-minded people. I think every person's product is an extension of themselves, and I like to think I'm ambitious and open-minded and generous. And
Yeah.
so extension, like everyone that comes to my events, most likely fit that profile. I have a lot of like mechanisms and tactics at the events. I have this 1,000-person mixer I do every month on a rooftop, beautiful views, skyline views, and I have about 30 to 40 volunteers that show up. They wear yellow lanyards and name tags, and their entire job is to greet people and smile at people and introduce them to people. That's all they do, and they love doing it. So that's the moment you walk in, you're like greeted by this smiley person, and so you feel great, you feel confident. You'll probably leave feeling great as well. And then there's different like name tag colors and stuff. So it just dials up the probability that you'll meet someone who's relevant. Like you wear red if you're looking for investment, you wear blue if you're just there to hang out, green is you meet friends, and so forth. So these little things make big differences.
I think that's so powerful. I think that, one of the key things about product is that you have to get your magic moment really fast. And two is
Mhm.
like how people leave the situation is a lot of how they remember it. And I think what's really awesome about what you're thinking about there is like one is the magic moment's really fast. The moment someone smiles at you and you're in and you don't feel like, oh, this is an event where it's going to feel awkward is pretty impactful. And then number two is like, I think that letting people choose their identity for the night is also really encouraging because on any given day, I might
Mm.
be one of all those three. But I get to choose who I want to be at that moment in time. And very
Yeah.
rarely do we get presented with that choice of, hey, do you want to be looking for friends tonight? Or do you want to just be there for fun? Or do you want to have your work hat on and looking for an investor? And so I really appreciate that. Okay, going through all of this, one of these questions that I've loved is, do you notice a difference in guest enjoyment changing based off the premium kind of environment of the event? Like if it's a mansion party versus a casual meetup, like does that impact your like how much a guest enjoys it?
Um, probably.
Yeah.
In my case, a lot of my events I don't serve. Well, I don't pay for open bar. And I don't like normally serve food. And the reason I do that is one, I don't drink, but two, I don't want people coming for free booze and food. Like if you're coming for that, like don't come. You're not the type of person I want in that room. Similarly enough, and this is maybe more like oversimplified than it should be. I don't want you coming if you're coming for a cool venue, like nice rooftop views. That's
Yeah.
not why you should be there. You should be there because of the people. Um, and so it probably does impact their experience. Now, if you take it to the extreme where it's like it's held in like a hospital with like really bright lights, then nobody's gonna have fun. So you need to meet a minimum threshold if it's enjoyable to be in and it's safe and it's secure. But beyond that, you don't have to go above and beyond and get a beautiful mansion or anything like that.
Again, I think another really counterintuitive point. Like if people, most of my experience just reading about and understanding events is like the venues are like a big part of the experience. And I think what I love what you're saying, which is what we believe at Sidebar, is that it's actually about the people. It's actually about like who's in the room and the conversations you're having. And I just think that this is an incredibly powerful insight for both of our companies, is that it's much less about the event or what it looks like, or it's much less about, um, it's about the value exchange. It's about the knowledge. It's about who you meet and how you interact. And I think that that is just like, it's like a truth hiding in plain sight. It makes so much sense when you say it, but it's actually like fairly counterintuitive. Okay, next question is, um, I mean, this is along the lines of what we're talking about, but Andrew, what's something you disagree with disagree with in kind of capital C community discourse? Like there's a lot of talk about community with a capital C now. Like what's something you're like,
Mm.
I just blatantly disagree with that.
A lot of people, there's this whole narrative. Well, first of all, it started off when people were distinguishing the difference between community and audience. And like the simple definition is like audience is, people, a group of people that follow you in a room, their chairs are positioned toward you versus community. It's more like a circle. They're there to engage with each other. And so now there's this whole narrative of people saying, here's how you build a community to make 50K extra a month. And I'm like, that's not the point of it though. The point of it is like to bring people together. And when I first started doing it, it was to bring people together, for me to meet friends, it was for my friends to make friends. It wasn't to like generate a side hustle. And so I think the biggest thing is like a lot of people come to me and they're like, how do I throw parties and how do I build communities? Because I want to make like 50 grand a year. And I'm like, that's not the point. I can't really help you. You're doing it for the wrong reasons. Now, On the other hand, someone like me and like yourself, you're building something to solve a problem, and it's a problem you've seen during your time at Facebook, as a product leader, and it's a problem I've seen, being in New York during like one of the most desperate times in the history of the nation. That's the right reason to build a community because you care
Yes.
about that. Yeah.
Yes. And you want to make a difference, right? And by not building it, like a lot less people's lives would be impacted in a lot less of a positive way. Or like saying it on the flip side, you're impacting people's lives in a positive way by getting people to come together and learn from each other and accelerate each other and help them grow. I think that the like doing it for what you say, for like that core reason, goes right back to the kind of that go-giver mentality, right? You're just trying to create as much value as you can. And I think
Mhm.
that it's really inspiring. So a follow-up question is, today we kind of see there's already an existing community for everything. Why should one venture into creating community if that's the aspiration? Like, how can that be differentiated and made successful? And I think that a core to the answer of this question is the why, right? Like, why are you creating the community, and like what's the why behind it? But Andrew, I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
I feel like I talk to so many entrepreneurs who they have what I think is a great idea, but then they do research and they're like, damn, this already exists. And I'm like, that's great. It means that's validating. It means someone is building in the space and they see what you see, and there's an opportunity. And so for someone who's like, oh, their communities already exist, there's no space for me to build something. I think most of the time that's wrong. I think you differ with two things. One is the design of what you're building, which feeds into the why. Why are you building this? What's your vision for this? And how is it different from everything else? What's your spin on it? And then two is like your distribution is most likely going to be different. If you build that distribution off your, personal brand, then you're going to be accessing, a different pool of people. So I would like try to survey and the landscape and understand like where the gaps are, and then just figure out your go to market. If it's like similar to what I've done, personal branding, just figure that part out, and there's an opportunity to build. I think there's still space for other communities to be built. It's definitely not saturated.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying is like, in addition to it not being saturated, I think that it's so much a reflection of the builder. Like, the community is so like, even your first community on LinkedIn was like kind of who you are, right? Like you like, I think that that's kind of makes room for there to be this infinite amount of ways that people can connect, because what I hear you saying, Andrew, is you have to lean into who you are as a person. And that's what really defines the community as differentiated. And actually trying to be like a community that you're not, or that someone else, is actually much harder to do, it sounds like,
Mhm.
than just being like who you are. Because as someone who you are, like, you don't want people who are there to just get free booze or free food. You don't want people who are there for the view. Like, you want people who are ambitious and kind and want to meet each other and want to help. And it's a
Mhm.
testament to getting volunteers, and it's a testament to building all these pieces out. And one question from the audience is that they've seen a huge difference at your parties, from a women feeling safe and welcome perspective, and really want to give kudos to you for that achievement, and really curious how you made that change.
I ask for a lot of feedback. My girlfriend is she's a CTO at a company she co-founded, and she's hyper aware of these scenarios, these situations where in a male dominant industry where someone like her could feel unsafe. So she gives me a lot of feedback. I have a lot of friends that give me feedback, and in terms of like the messaging, the design, the event structure, where I can cater to having more people feel included and secure. So that's something I'm always thinking about. I have a lot of room for improvement, but I'm always thinking about that in terms of the safety component is very important.
Yeah, it's critical. And I think what your answer, which is just get a lot of feedback and make it better. Like, it's just like constantly improve it. Really
Mhm.
sounds like that's the key, is just continuing to be super mindful about it and look at it through lots of different perspective, and just get feedback, and iterate and make it better and better. I
Mhm.
think the next question is, what are your thoughts on, I mean, you kind of talked about your original Reddit post and how it kind of sparked, you're like, whoa, there's like a here. What are your thoughts on leveraging platforms like Discord or Reddit to create, grow, and engage the community? these sites have users with established and known feature sets. I think LinkedIn falls into this category we talked about, which I super believe that LinkedIn is this incredibly undervalued resource. It's just there aren't a lot of creators and there's a lot of distribution. Like, how do you think about kind of Reddit and Discord and how those fit into the equation?
Yeah, Reddit and Discord, they're gold mines. They're gold mines because people share candid feedback. There's sort of democratic mechanisms to it where good content is surfaced not because it was paid for, but because it was upvoted. And so, from the business building angle, you could build multi-million dollar businesses off just going on Reddit, scraping the forums, and going into niche communities and identifying problems that you can solve for those niche communities. For example, like running communities. Sampar has done this really well. He just went into the sort of the Fat Fire community, sort of the financial independent, retire early, and he built like a podcast off it. So I think under-tapped resources for building communities, building businesses. Now, the technically, the execution is hard because you have to find a way to build a reputation on those platforms and then migrate people off platform to an audience that you own. Those are borrowed audiences. Not enough people are actually, I shouldn't say that, but there's a huge opportunity to use those platforms.
Yeah, really well said. And I think I think the blueprint is first you have to establish credibility in the community and spend time and really do that. And then
Yeah.
the interesting part is to migrate them off that. Or like, it's like not that they're leaving Reddit, but to add them to kind of like what you're about. I think that
Yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And so, another question, just as they're flying through is like, let's go. Oh, this is an interesting question. How do you like, what's your core metric for defining success? Like, how do you define if an event was successful? I think this is a question that I get a lot, right? Like a lot of people will come to events. Maybe the NPS score will be really high, but like,
Mhm.
how do you like kind of look at your portfolio and be like, this is going really well, or this is off and I need to fix this?
I haven't figured it out for the large scale events. For large scale, it's retention. I look at a retention over time in terms of how many people will attend the event again, and also other formats, and also unsubscribes. But when it comes to the really curated small dinners, let's say 16% CEO dinners, and I say this in the beginning of every dinner, I say that my goal is for you to leave with one person, or sorry, that came out wrong. Leave having met one person that you plan to connect with on a deeper level. And that could be for business, it could be for personal, but there's one person you plan to have coffee with again or a Zoom call with again. That to me is value. If you leave an event with like one new connection, I think that's ROI positive on your time.
I love how simple that is. Like you just distill it down, right? And you're like, hey, one new person I'm going to interact with, like that's like a good use of an evening. And I think that that's like a
Yeah.
very clean metric. Um, and a lot of what we see too in Sidebar, it's like it's really about personal connections in between people. And I
Mhm.
think that, a metric at its core is only a proxy for the goal. And your goal is to connect people to people who they want to be around and who they want to meet and who can help each other in their careers. And so I think that that really resonates. Okay, last question. And then I'm going to ask you to just kind of leave everyone with a lasting piece of advice. So, um, this is actually a good combination of both. What's one piece of advice you received that's really stuck with you while building your business? And I think that like it's kind of what I would say is like, what's something you come back to, when the highs are high and the lows are low, and you're kind of sitting at it and you're trying to build all these things. And as builders and creators, we're like, it's sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not quite where we want it to be. Like, what do you come back to? Like, what's the piece of advice where you're like, oh, that really stuck with me?
Mm. Um, yeah, I like to remind myself, well, the piece of advice is kind of like in your question, actually. It's to remind yourself why you started in the first place.
Yeah.
And I started building community because I wanted to solve my own problem of loneliness, and then I wanted to solve that problem for other people. Um, Now it's a little different when I ask myself, why did I quit Google to become an entrepreneur and sponsor my own visa and take on a ton of risk? And it's the idea of one, like freedom, not being tied to a company for my visa and my salary, and then two, I'm really inspired when people try to break down walls and solve hard problems so that they can share with others how they've solved those problems and help other people solve those problems. So that's why I write so much, and that's why I love going on webinars and sessions, and I like speaking to students. It's because I've solved a few problems in my life that I think have been relatively hard for me, and I want to help others do the same. And that just keeps me going.
Such a beautiful image, right? Like it's like as you make it through the door, you're turning around to hold the door to make sure everyone walks through it with you.
Mhm.
And I think that the why when you're at those moments is so important. It's very similar for me. Like I want to be part of a team that makes a difference in a billion people's lives in my lifetime. And it doesn't need to be a difference that's like written across the sky. It's just people feeling a bit more empowered or a bit more confident or a bit more seen, and just like consistently. And I think that that drive is just like that's what gets me up in the morning. It's what I go to bed thinking about. And so, Andrew, to just finish up on time, I think the last question here is obviously creating community is incredibly valuable. All the people on the call are just energized, excited, interested about it. If you had to distill down your kind of one piece of advice for people on kind of community and through events and how you think about it, we've talked about a lot, but what would be your kind of parting wisdom? What would be like if you came to someone and they, regardless of the question, you were like, this is the kind of heartbeat of it. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have a thought on like generally, accelerating your life accelerating your career and sort of building something for yourself, whether that's community or some sort of related business. I speak with so many, like I spoke with so many people at Google and Facebook who are like mid-career and they're stuck and they're unfulfilled, but they're making a ton of money, but they're so unfulfilled. Yet the one thing they'll never pull the trigger on that was a game changer for me is investing in two things. And they're sort of related. One is event experiences where, like, say you pay for a weekend where you're at a retreat with other business leaders, and there's like a bunch of programming, and you learn how to get unstuck and break into your zone and network with other executives. People don't want to do it. They'll pay hundreds of dollars for conferences or for concerts, but not for like the summit versions, where it's more productive. The second thing is, and I wasn't paid to say this, but communities like yours, where they're paying for access to a group of people they would have never met otherwise. Googlers only meet Googlers, Facebookers only meet Facebook or MetaMates, whatever it is. They're stuck in their own, vacuum, and there's groupthink. They keep talking about the same things over and over again. There's no diversity of thought. Now, if so many of those people have come to my events and joined communities like yours, where they're like, that's changed everything for us. These small little actions can make the biggest difference. And like you said, all you have to do is meet one person that could completely change the trajectory of your life. So I would say just invest in things like that provide you with access and new ways of thinking that you wouldn't normally have access to if you just stayed in your lane.
Thank you so much, Andrew. That's a brilliant answer, and I completely agree. And I'm super grateful for your time. I feel like us connecting has really changed the trajectory of my life, and so I'm super grateful. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. And Andrew, if people have questions or thoughts, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you, or where should they find you?
Yeah, I have a newsletter, Andrew.today. Yeah, Andrew.today. And
Great.
I read every single reply. Yeah,
Can you throw that in there, and can everyone sign up for Andrew today? And we'll go from there. Thank you so
yeah,
much.
cool.
And yeah,
Thanks,
if
everyone.
anyone's
Thanks for having
interested
me.
in checking out Sidebar, it's just sidebar.com. And thanks everyone, and we really appreciate it. And we hope you have a great day.
Take care, everyone. Have a good
Take
weekend.
care.